So, have you ever really thought about how a country becomes what it is today? Is it forged in the fire of a massive war? Is it completely remade by a revolution? Or is it something that's built carefully, piece by piece over time? Well, we're going to dive into the incredibly turbulent 20th century to see how some of today's nations really came to be.
And this quote, wow, it really just sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. See, World War II wasn't just another conflict. It was like a global reset button, a crucible that just melted down old empires and, from the ashes, forged brand new realities.
And this is the cost of that reset. Over 60 million people. It's a number so huge it's almost impossible to wrap your head around it. But it's so important to remember that out of this just unimaginable destruction, something else happened. A period of profound creation and reinvention began for countries all over the world. So, let's start with what's probably the most violent and, frankly, the most common way nations get made: war. We're going to look at how these intense conflicts, whether they're from the inside or the outside, can completely reshape what a country is. Nation building through war usually goes down one of two very different paths. On one hand, you've got countries literally tearing themselves apart in these brutal civil wars. We saw this in places like El Salvador and Mozambique. And then, on the other hand, you have the fight against an outside force, a struggle for sheer survival against foreign domination, which is exactly what Latvia went through with the Soviet Union.
Okay, let's take a closer look at El Salvador. This timeline here shows a grueling 12-year-long civil war. I mean, this was not a quick fight. It was a grinding, violent stalemate where, frankly, both sides committed terrible atrocities, leaving these deep, lasting scars on the entire soul of the nation. 75,000. That's the estimated number of people who died. For a small country, that kind of loss is just devastating. But it's more than just the numbers. This kind of war leaves behind a legacy of shattered trust in your government, in your neighbors, that can take generations to even begin to heal. And the thing is, the roots of this conflict go way back. The war in the 80s didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was an explosion of tensions that had been simmering for decades, going all the way back to events like the 1932 peasant uprising, which became known as La Matanza, the slaughter. History really does have a long memory. Now, if we turn to Mozambique, we see a tragically similar story. Gaining independence from Portugal in 1975 should have been this incredible moment of triumph, right? But instead, it was almost immediately followed by a vicious 15-year civil war that just crippled the new nation before it even had a chance to get on its feet. And the cost here? Even higher, over 100,000 lives lost. For a brand new country just trying to figure out its future, the war didn't just destroy buildings and roads. It drained it of an entire generation of people, potential leaders, innovators, builders, which completely changed its path forward. All right, so let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about internal conflict. But what happens when the fight is against an external superpower? Well, in Latvia, the enemy wasn't a fellow countryman. It was the Soviet Union. And this policy of Russification was basically a systematic plan to erase Latvian culture, the language, the identity, everything. So for them, the fight against this cultural annihilation became the thing that defined modern Latvian nationhood. But not every nation's story is written in blood and battle. Some reinvent themselves in other ways. So in this next part, we're going to look at two totally different paths: the sudden, explosive change of a revolution and the slow, deliberate process of evolution. Our first stop is Iran. It's a country with this incredibly ancient history, and it's parked right in one of the most volatile parts of the world. Its story in the 20th century is one of just sudden, massive, dramatic change. And what a transformation it was. The Islamic Revolution in 1979 was so fast and so total. It was fueled by this widespread anger at the Shah's rule. In just a matter of months, mass protests completely toppled a monarchy that had been around for centuries and replaced it with something entirely new: a theocracy. A system ruled by religious leaders that completely redefined Iran's place on the world stage. And this right here is such a crucial point. As dramatic as Iran's story is, it is absolutely not the only way to do things. Some nations choose a totally different route. Not revolution, but a kind of careful, deliberate evolution. And that brings us to Sweden.
I mean, Sweden's journey could not be more different. It built its modern identity not on a battlefield, but through a series of very conscious policy choices. Because it managed to stay stable for so long, it avoided the huge wars its neighbors were fighting and could focus inward. By building a massive social safety net and championing peace, Sweden basically defined itself by what it chose to build, not by what it was forced to fight against. Okay, so we've looked at all these different paths, from horrific wars and sudden revolutions to peaceful, deliberate policy. So what does this all tell us about what a nation even is?
Well, this chart is a powerful reminder of the human price. I mean, look at it. Whether you're talking tens of thousands in a civil war or tens of millions in a world war, the process of defining, defending, and creating a nation is so often written in blood. The scale changes, but the sacrifice seems to be a constant.
So, what are the ingredients for a nation? As we've seen, there's no single recipe, right? A country can be shaped by the trauma of a global war or a civil war. It can be forged in resistance to occupation, or born from the sudden upheaval of revolution, or it can be built through the quiet determination of policy. Every path creates a totally unique national story.
And all of that leads to this final, really big question. When you look at all these stories of constant struggle and reinvention, is a nation ever really a finished product? Or is it just this perpetual work in progress, constantly being shaped and reshaped by the currents of history? Makes you think, doesn't it?